And so we're excited to be here. How excited are we? This is how excited we are to be here tonight, to be able to tell you the story, first of my leaving Microsoft to start Room to Read, later leaving Room to Read to do something new and different, which is called Yugo. My life transition started at a trekking company's presentation in Sydney, where I was living working for Microsoft, as they showed the Annapurna Circuit, an 18-day trek around these beautiful mountains, these beautiful mountain ranges in Nepal. I know this is a well-traveled crowd. How many of you have been to Nepal? Yeah, like 40% of the crowd's been to Nepal. And what I went there for initially was just the idea to escape, to have 18 days with no cell phone signal, no internet, no Monday morning management team meetings. I just wanted to escape all those things. Mostly, I wanted to escape these guys. There was a rumor that if you went high enough in the Himalayas, you could escape the sound of Steve Ballmer yelling at you to crush the competition and take out IBM and take out Netscape and all those things that Steve Ballmer would always be shouting and screaming about. And so going to Nepal for 18 days seemed like a really cool deal. At the end of my first day of the 18 days of trekking, I met a headmaster from a rural school. He was drinking tea in a little bhatti, a little tea house on the side of the trail. We started chatting. He said, "Would you like to see my school tomorrow? I can take you in the morning." And I said, "Great, I'd love to go see the school." And like many schools in the developing world, it was simultaneously hopeful while being sad. Hopeful because the kids were showing up, eager to learn. Sad because of the conditions, dilapidated conditions, no ventilation, no windows, dirt floors, all these little bodies crammed into a room that was just, the school was dilapidated. And then the headmaster said, "Now you have to see the library." And I got excited, because how many of you are or were library nerds as kids? Like the Vail Symposium, right? Like 100% of you. I am proud to say I was a library nerd as a kid. To this day, I'm a book nerd. And I mistakenly thought the library would be the happy part of the tour. It would look like this. There'd be kids with smiles on their faces reading bright, shiny books. That's what a library is, right? Wrong. The library was an empty room where theoretically a library could have existed, but they had almost no books. They had a cabinet in the back with a padlock on it, where they locked up the books to protect them from the children. No irony noted. But the books were considered precious, but the books were all backpacker cast-offs. I'm no literary snob. I think every child should read Danielle Steele at some point of their pedagogical development. But these were Umberto Eco, like stuff that I'm sure backpackers were happy to get that copy of Foucault's Pendulum out of their backpack and leave it at the school, but it was not going to help the children at all. I asked the headmaster why. How can you be missing something as basic as books? And he said, "Well, in Nepal, you have to understand, sir, we are too poor to afford education. But until we have education, we will always remain poor." And that struck me as being possibly the topic sentence of poverty. My father's father had a fourth grade education. He had to quit school to work because his father died. My father only went to university on a scholarship, the only one of 7 children in his family to go. That was my family's ticket to the middle class, and that was my ticket to be able to go to Kellogg to get my MBA and work at Northwestern and make a lot of money as a young person. But here he was saying we are too poor to afford education, but until we get educated for our kids, we'll always remain poor. And then he spoke a sentence that would forever change my life. It was a sentence that would eventually cost me millions of dollars, which was, "Perhaps, sir, you will someday come back with books." And I got so excited by the idea. As a book nerd myself, how cool would it be to come back to this village with the solution, or part of the solution, to say we can make the world a better place, starting by something as simple as 400 children in a school who can have a library. But I am a big thinker, and so I was like, yeah, I could come back with some books, but I'd like to come back with lots and lots and lots of books. I'd like to come back with a yak load of books. That's how they measure things in Nepal, the yak load. I'd like to come back with a full frontal yak attack. Yaks and yaks and yaks and gaggles of yaks and fleets of yaks and flotillas of yaks, and come help these villages. So I wrote a note in my journal. I wrote my pitch piece. When I got back to Kathmandu, I sent mail to friends around the world and said, "Please send books, please send money. We're going to try to do a library. Maybe we'll do 2 libraries, who knows? But let's get started. Let's do something to help these communities. My 73-year-old father, God rest his soul, needed a retirement project. My mother needed my 73-year-old father to have a retirement project. And thankfully, this little book initiative became the project. And my dad helped me collect books. He was living in Parachute in western Colorado. I'm not quite sure why they moved. That my family seems to keep missing the parts of Colorado you should live in. But my parents' garage became the collection point for books, and my office at Microsoft Australia became another collection point, and we collected over 3,000 children's books. And I was so excited, and my dad said, "Can I come with you?" And I said, "Dad, this is hardship travel. You're trekking, you're staying in drafty tea houses, you're sleeping on a bench or a board with a sleeping bag." And my dad said, "I survived the Depression, I survived World War II. When did you get to be so condescending?" And I said, "Okay, well, I guess, yeah, you know what? That's on me. I'll buy you a ticket. I'll buy your flight." And he goes, "Well, because I'm so old and feeble, I assume the flight's in business class." So my hubris cost me a lot of money, as hubris often does. But we went back to Nepal, back for me a year later, his first time. And we'd met some Nepalese philanthropists, if you can call them that, do-gooders over email and over the internet. And they said, divide up the books. Don't give all 3,000 books to one school. Give 500 to 6 different schools. Share the wealth. We'll help you. We'll go with you. And so the first school we went to, I was like, let's have all the kids queue up, a nice queue, and every kid will accept 5 or 10 books, and they'll walk them into the school, and we'll have like a really good photo op and all that stuff. And it was like a mosh pit. The minute the book bag was open, these kids were stage diving. It was like literacy palooza. 6 of you got that joke. Fantastic. And this was the reaction we got at each of the 6 schools. These children, their smiles were as wide as the Zambezi River. Their eyes were as big as pizzas. They were so excited to have children's books. The parents, the teachers came over to us and hugged us and thanked us. And at the 6th and final school, I had a teacher walk up to me, and he shook my hand. And he said, "Thank you for helping these children." And I said, "I'm happy to do my bit." "Well, which school do you teach in?" He said, No, I do not teach in any of these schools. I have walked 3 hours over that mountain pass to come, Mr. Wood." And he said, at the time, Nepalese people would learn English through the BBC radio. So in a perfect BBC radio voice, he handed me an envelope and he said, "Mr. Wood, I wish to petition you. My children need a library. We wish to inculcate the habit of reading in our children." And I thought, any headmaster who can use the word inculcate in a sentence with a straight face probably deserves my support. So I started thinking about the next library and the next library and the next library. And I'm kind of Bob the Builder. And so I started thinking 750 million people in the world are illiterate. 2/3 are girls and women. These 6 libraries are possibly just a down payment on the dream. I went back at the time Microsoft had me in Beijing, running business development for Microsoft Greater China, and I knew my life had to change. I write about it in my memoir. Within a month, I'd broken up with my then girlfriend. I joked that my future was in the third world and hers was at the Four Seasons. And I walked into my boss's office at Microsoft and I said, "You're not going to like what I'm about to tell you, so here's the deal I'm going to tell you. I'm going to leave for the day. I'll come back tomorrow, we can discuss it." He looked at me like I was strange, and I said, I quit. I can't do this anymore. I want to do something different with my life. I was 35, and to be honest, I didn't have squadzillions of dollars. I just had a lot of ambition. And my coworkers throughout the entire Microsoft system were just insanely understanding and supportive of this decision at age 35 to quit my job to pursue the idea of bringing libraries to the developing world. But I didn't think it was crazy because there's these examples in history. For example, Andrew Carnegie set up 2,500 libraries in his lifetime. And when you talk to people who are experts in philanthropy, this is widely viewed as being one of the greatest philanthropic initiatives of all time because it leveled the playing field. No matter your religion, no matter your caste, no matter your level of income, no matter what gender you were, you had access to books. And so I went, and at the time you couldn't Google it because this was 2000, so I Yahoo'd it. Anybody remember Yahoo? God rest their soul. Who is the Andrew Carnegie of the developing world? And there wasn't one. So it's like, bingo! That's my mission. I'm not going to keep selling software. I'm going to be the Andrew Carnegie of the developing world. And so we started this little thing in San Francisco. I moved back to California. I set up an office in the Presidio. In my first year, I raised a whopping $35,000 because I didn't know how to fundraise. But the idea was very simple. It was to help kids in places like post-Khmer Rouge Cambodia, post-war Vietnam. We eventually worked in post-tsunami Sri Lanka. We started working in South Africa and Zambia and Tanzania. And the idea was very simple. First and foremost, it was to set what the author Jim Collins, one of my favorite business authors, called a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. My belief in life is that bold goals attract bold people and that wimpy goals attract wimpy people. So if I had simply said, I'm going to set up 50 libraries, people would have said, good on you, mate, good luck, you can do that without my help. I said, no, we're going to reach 10 million children by the year 2020. We're going to do that in 3 ways. One, by building schools, because the world needs a lot more classrooms, especially in places with a lot of youthful populations. The flagship would always be libraries, setting up libraries so kids like these kids in Cambodia who were recovering from the genocide of the Khmer Rouge era would have access to libraries. And then third, scholarships for young women, because in the developing world, 2/3 of those who are not in school are girls and women. And we all know that if you want to change the world, there's no better way to do it than to start by making sure that there's equal access for every single woman, every single young girl to be able to go to school. Now, people sometimes say, well, you do this girls' scholarship program, are you anti-boy? And as a former boy, myself, I would never want to be accused of being anti-boy. The first 2 programs benefited boys and girls, but this was really the catch-up to say, let's make sure that every school and every library has equal access for the young women. And I took a very business-like approach to what I do. I come from a business background. I really believe that charity should be run, I said, with the heart of Mother Teresa, but the scalability of Starbucks. If you're going to attack a problem, be like Paul Farmer at Partners in Health and go after it in a very big, very scalable way. We set up, my co-founder Aaron, who's ex-Goldman Sachs, ex-Unilever, our co-founder Dinesh, who's a Nepalese national, who's still with me today, working alongside me, launching Yugo in Nepal. We set up 5 key elements of the business model, and James wanted me to talk about this because he said a lot of you in the audience are very generous, you do your own thing in philanthropy, and what lessons can you learn, at least from what I learned at Room to Read. The first one was local empowerment. The idea being that we didn't want to send Americans or Swiss or Germans overseas to tell the local people how to fix their problem. We said Room to Read will always be run by Indians in India, by Cambodians in Cambodia, by Tanzanians in Tanzania. They speak the language. They're not looking at this as a short-term 2-year assignment. They're there on the ground. They speak the language every single day. By the time I left Room to Read, we had 1,800 employees. 95% of them were local, national. They were in their country of origin doing their best. What they did really well was to challenge the communities we worked with. I believe very much that free is not valued. If you give something away, it is not valued. What you want to do is say to people, we'll help you, but we won't only help you if you can help yourself. Our first country director in South Africa, Chris Matupi, used to tell communities there are 2 types of help, self-help and help from others. You don't deserve help from others until you've proven that you are willing to invest in self-help. So this is a photo from the early years of Room to Read where we told communities we can help you to build a new school, to expand an existing school, to build a freestanding library building, but we'll only help you if you can help yourself. And we call that the challenge grant. The idea being we told governments that we worked with, we will not pay teachers' salaries, we will not pay librarians' salaries. We can't bear those ongoing costs. You have to promise us as the Ministry of Education that you will provide those teachers and those librarians and pay their salary. And we're going to monitor this because we're business people. We monitor this stuff very, very, very closely. So we challenged the governments, and we played the governments off against each other. We told governments, if your people start asking us for bribes, we will cut your budget by 50% that year and move it to a different country where we're not being asked for bribes. Thankfully, the request for bribes almost never came in because they knew that we were very serious about it. But most importantly, as my cohort Dinesh said in Nepal, people don't steal from themselves. When they are investing in the project, they're going to make sure that it is something that is taken well care of locally. The third thing we did is created a direct project adoption model. We didn't call them donors, we call them investors. How many times have you written a check to charity, and if it's the first time you've given a check to them, your reward is 15 solicitations in the next 6 months, urgent appeals with fake Post-it notes on them and all that stuff. And you don't know where the money goes. You don't know if the money's going. You just don't know where it's going. So what we said early on is we're going to create a model of a direct causal link between what a family foundation or what a company does and what we do with the money. So I'd go out and I'd make speeches around the world and say, this is what $10,000 will do. It will set up a library in Cambodia. You can visit it. We will send you photos. We'll send you videos. If you want to dedicate this to the customers of your small business, or your grandmother's turning 80 and you want to do a library in her honor, we will put a plaque in that library. You can visit it. We've literally had thousands of families and companies around the world said, this makes total sense. We may not be able to do everything, but this is one small thing we can do. And one of my favorite stories, and I get emails every week from people saying, I think every day about my trip to Cambodia, visiting the library we honored my grandmother with after she died. So we really took it seriously to say, create a direct link. And we still do that today when I tell the story about Hugo that I'll tell you a bit more about. The fourth element was what I call a culture of entrepreneurship. In other words, you don't accept excuses. Nature abhors a vacuum. Entrepreneurs abhor a vacuum. Whether it be Michael Dell or Richard Branson or Bill Gates, when they see a vacuum, entrepreneurs move in. Many of you in this room, I know, have built businesses. You see an opportunity, you move in. Well, I believe social impact should be that same way. If you see a gap, if you see something that's missing, you don't make excuses. You go and you figure out how to fill it in. One of our biggest issues in the early years of Room to Read It was that most of our books were in the English language. That's what we could get. That's what people could donate. So we'd be shipping Hop on Pop and One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish to the developing world, and Harry Potter and Go Dog Go. But what was missing was the ability for us to be able to create books in the mother tongue. Now, we're very data-driven, so in 2003, we did a survey of 50 different communities where we were working to say, what is Room to Read not doing that you would most like? Number one answer, 56% of respondents said more books in the mother tongue. But the issue is very simple, and we had someone from Scholastic on our advisory board, Carol Sequoian, their VP of International, and she said, nobody's going to publish books in the Lao language or the Khmer language or Swahili. And we just name language after language after language because the people are too poor. When people are living on $1 a day, they don't have any money for children's books, so there's no market incentive. So we said, okay, if that's the case, we have to become a publisher. How? And so the question came up, do we take Pippi Longstocking or Heidi and translate it into Khmer or Vietnamese, but then some kid in the Mekong Delta is like, who's the girl with the pigtails and living in the mountains yodeling? Wouldn't really make much sense. Kids need books that they can relate to. Kids need books that are culturally relevant. So the entrepreneur in me said, we got to create a publishing arm, a nonprofit publishing arm. But many of us in this room have traveled to places in the developing world. You see the handicrafts, you see the art, you see the textiles, you see the magic of people who love storytelling. Nobody loves storytelling more than Tanzanians and Zambians. And we said, let's just ignite in them the opportunity to create something that's never existed. Let's create the world's biggest children's publishing arm as a nonprofit arm, which empowers people in the developing world to write their own future, to write their own children's books. We started with 10 books in Nepal in the Nepalese language, thanks to Jeff Skoll and his team at the Skoll Foundation. They gave us a $100,000 grant to publish our first 10 titles, 10,000 copies of each. 100,000 equals 100,000. We liked the direct link there. And this thing just started taking off. Our Vietnamese team, our Cambodian team, our Indian team, our Sri Lankan team said, when can we do this? How can we get started with this? What I'm going to show you here is something I'm very proud of. I'm going to show you 50 books in 50 seconds. These are all books that Room to Read published. 100% of them are original titles, 100% of them are local artists, 100% of them are local authors. 50 books in 50 seconds. Enjoy. So what do you think? Did we find the J.K. Rowlings? I know some of you are probably worried about the plight of the lost baby elephant. I definitely want to assure you that all of our books have happy endings. They got reunited. But for us, the happy ending was that we were literally finding the J.K. Rowling of Zambia. We were finding the Tintin of Tanzania. We were finding the Dr. Seuss of India, or the Dr. Seuss of India. And this became an incredibly big program. To date, Room to Read has published over 40 million children's books. 40 million, starting from that initial 100,000. And part of that is because the fifth and final element of our business culture was what we call a culture of GSD. GSD are my three favorite initials, because there's some young people in the audience. I will tell you that this stands for Get Stuff Done. But there are other ways you can also express this sentiment. And our idea was basically, don't talk about the problem, act upon the solution. If you've run into a roadblock, admit it to your teammates, tell your teammates about it, but then let's brainstorm and figure out, as with a local language publishing program, how can we break the logjam? How can we get unstuck? And so for us, this culture of building boards around the world and liaising with the Goldman Sachs and the Credit Suisses of the world to say, yes, we're a nonprofit, but we move at your speed. We move with your level of focus. We can partner with you to do amazing things. And so by our fourth year, we're on the verge of out Carnegie and Carnegie. By our fifth year, we'd actually open our 2,500th library. So it's okay, we out Carnegie as a startup, as a nonprofit, raising philanthropic capital, which is the hardest capital to raise. And we said, so how are we going to set our sights? It's easier to drive at night if you have taillights to follow, so what are we going to do? And in a meeting one day, I said, I've got it. We're going to out Starbucks. Starbucks at the time was opening outlets. You couldn't believe how fast they were opening out. I said, well, if they know how to scale and we know how to scale, can we beat Starbucks? Can we open libraries faster than they open coffee shops? And one of our young analysts, Jason, who had been working for Credit Suisse for a number of years, we had him run the numbers. And I was told it was impossible because you can't compete on salary. You can't compete in terms of raising capital efficiently from Wall Street. You can't issue stock. You can't issue bonds. The options you offer your employees only pay off karmically in the afterlife. How can you possibly compete against Starbucks? And I said, GSD. I don't know how we're going to do it. I just know that we have to go after that. And so this shows Starbucks post-IPO, years 1 through 12, and Room to Read. And in the initial years, they're kicking our butt. By the third year, we're pulling even. By the fourth year, we're pulling ahead. By years 5 through 12, we actually out Starbucks. We opened libraries faster than they opened outlets. And that, to me, was a proof point that philanthropy, thank you. That was a proof point to me that philanthropy could scale if you took a very focused approach to it and took it very seriously. People often ask me, why did you leave Microsoft? Why didn't you just stay there and earn the money and treat Room to Read as your part-time job? And I said, easy, because hobbies don't scale. If I was doing this part-time, Microsoft would always have first dibs. They would set my schedule. They'd set my calendar. I was so free once I left Microsoft that our team could do all of these things. To date, we're at 16x Carnegie. 40,000 libraries that Room to Read has opened around the world. Well over 30 million students impacted. And I was pretty happy with my life. This photo was not taken at the opening ceremony for Windows version, whatever version they're on now. This was taken at the opening of a school that we were funding in a rural village in northern Laos. But as much as I was happy with what I was doing, there was something in the back of my head that told me I may need to have a next act in my life. And Amy and I talked quite a bit about this because we would spend a lot of time. We were newly married. We were living in Hong Kong. We could easily get to the schools. Nepal was a 5-hour flight. Vietnam was a 2-hour flight. Cambodia was a 2-hour flight. We'd go visit these schools where Room to Read was working. And I remember one day being in the Mekong Delta, going off to a graduation ceremony. These were young women who were finishing the Room to Read girls' education program. They were the first in their family to finish secondary school. There were 100 young women graduating that day, and I had to be there. We were taking a group of our investors. But my father was dying of cancer. And I said, I'm not going to Vietnam, Dad, I'm coming home. My father said, don't come home. You and Amy have been home. You've seen me several times. Those young women, John, are waiting for you. I'm your co-founder, John. I was with you the day you started this thing. Your job is to be in Vietnam with those young women. He died during that trip. My mother texted me. It was a tough day, but it was also a joyful day because he was with me in spirit. These young women were graduating. It was joyful. But as often happened, I was approached by a father. Amy and I are often approached by fathers, by mothers, by grandmothers. I love the grandmothers. They would wag their finger in my face and say, Mr. Wood, my granddaughter is not done yet. She wants to be a teacher. She wants to be a nurse, a doctor. We don't want her to work in a glove factory or a sweatshop. She can do something big with her life, but she needs help. And this is not unusual for us. Amy and I had seen a young woman named Tay T, who was a Room to Read graduate. A private donor of ours helped her through a side investment to go through school. She became an English teacher. She runs a small coffee shop, and she put both of her brothers through university after she had graduated. And this was just a one-off. This was a donor of ours, happened to meet her in a village in Vietnam, and they helped Tay T. This is Dum Haway. Our good friend John Ridding, the CEO of the Financial Times, was with Amy and I in a village in Cambodia, met this young woman. She was the oldest of 9 children in her family. He helped her to go to university. She put all 8 of her younger siblings through secondary school, 5 of her younger siblings through university, and she and her brother built the parents a new home, replacing their mud hut with this. Amy and I had seen the power of this model because we would ask the families through the local team, would ask for an interpreter to make sure we got it right, and would say, Room to Read doesn't have a program to help women go to university. We're wary of scope creep. It's not in our charter. It's not what we're empowered to. I sounded like a McKinsey consultant explaining all the reasons we couldn't do this. But Amy and I would often look at each other, and as you do when you're in an awesome marriage, you kind of go, yeah, we should do this. So we'd say, what does your granddaughter need? And they would tell us, she needs 15 million dong. What's 15 million dong? We'd look at the number and we'd say, oh, really? Is that the number? And they would say, yeah. And they would look at that. They would think that number was so big because it was 15 million dong, and I'd think that's so small because that's $650. And I didn't want to be snobby about it, but you're kind of like, we can afford to do this. So we started kind of adopting all these young women we met in India and Nepal. It was a total, these were all one-offs. It was all situational. It was random. It was not systematized. But we did it anyway because it felt like the right thing to do. And then in 2019, 4 young women who had worked for us at Room to Read Vietnam said, we're starting an NGO called the Relay Fund. The Relay Fund is going to focus exclusively on what we've been doing with you and Amy, funding university scholarships for young women. I said, how many, we'll fund the first 10. What do you need? $650 was all they needed for 1 year of university. And that's partly currency arbitrage because you're taking a strong currency and converting it to a weak currency. It's probably because the Vietnamese government subsidizes education, and it's also because sometimes families will put in a little bit of money themselves. But that's all they needed. So I said to them, after a year of trial of 10 young women going to university, I said, in your wildest dreams, how many young women would you like to fund for university next year? And they said 40. And I said, wilder. And they said 50. And I said, wilder. And they said, could we do 100? And we were living in Hong Kong. Hong Kong's coming out of COVID. Everybody's vaccinated. Everybody's like ready to party. So Amy and I went to all of our friends in Hong Kong and we said, this is the pirate ship party. This is not you writing a check to Room to Read. This is not tax deductible. We are not registered. We have no audit committee. We have no board. We're going to throw this pirate ship party anyway. And the goal is to raise enough money to fund 100 young women for 1 year, their first year. We raised enough money that night to fund all 100 young women for all 4 years of their university. It was one house party in Hong Kong, and we did it. And at the post party that went very late that night, a number of my friends came up to me and they said, this is your next NGO. You have to take this model and bring it to the world because you've been doing everything you've been doing for 20 plus years. Room to Read's great. You've gotten your 3rd generation CEO in place. You've got the leadership team in place. You've got loyal investors. Why not go off and do this? But I felt this incredible sense of guilt. Will Room to Read be okay? Can I leave? Founders usually leave in a body bag, or founders leave because there's a scandal. And I thought, maybe I could do this transition, but will Room to Read be okay? And then in the summer of 2021, Amy and little Orion, who's sitting over there, and I were heading to Sedona to meet the very same friends who had hosted the house party in Hong Kong. We were all traveling post-COVID. We were psyched. We're driving across the desert to Laura and her husband Don's place, and my phone rings, and I hear the words, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Yeah, I'm driving 95 miles an hour through the Arizona desert, driving with my knee while I'm talking to you, but technically I'm sitting down. Why?" Just got a call. Mackenzie Scott, the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, Mackenzie Scott, is giving Room to Read a cash gift of $25 million. I said, over how many years? Over the next 24 hours. I said, "Is that why we have $60 million in the bank account?" And they go, "No, it'll be $85 million tomorrow." And one of our board members, Scott Kapnick, who runs ex-Goldman, he runs a group in New York called HPS, which is being bought by BlackRock, longtime friend and mentor, called me and he said, "Congratulations, this would have never happened if you had not left Microsoft to start Room to Read. But this is your signal. This is your permission slip from the world. I know you've been dabbling in something new. This is your permission slip from the world." And so we texted Laura and Don and said, "Put some champagne on ice. We're doing something new." And that was the idea behind starting Yugo. Amy and I decided we're going to change our lives around again. I'm going to blow my life up all over again. I never thought I'd leave Microsoft to start Room to Read. I never thought I'd leave Room to Read to start something new. But the idea behind Yugo is very simple. These 6 words borrowed from Nick Kristof of the New York Times: talent is universal, opportunity is not. So many young people in the world today have so much potential, but because of their circumstances of their birth, they don't get an opportunity to go to university. So the idea behind Yugo is quite simple. It was to work with Room to Read, but maybe work with other NGOs. And as a guy who's very data-driven, I put together a volunteer team over LinkedIn of researchers. I didn't pay them because I'm a cheapskate, and Amy doesn't get paid. I don't get paid. We all work for free at Yugo. But the idea was to go out and interview 100 different nonprofits, or I call them NGOs, non-governmental organizations around the world, to say, are you running into the same issue that Room to Read has run into? That you have this cohort of teenage young women who are finishing secondary school, who have promise, who have ambition, who have career goals. And of these 100 NGOs, about 90 were saying, yes, 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 yes. Not surprising, because the world's invested tens of billions of dollars in programs for young and adolescent young women. But as we all know who have kids, they grow up quickly. And so these NGOs from Bangladesh to Pakistan to Tanzania were saying, when can we start? How can we work with you? Can we be your partner? And we said, hold on 1 minute. We just want to be clear. We are not the Mercedes-Benz of scholarship programs. We're the Subaru of scholarship. We're talking about, we set our goal of $800 per scholar per year and said, if that moves the needle, we can work with you. If that's not enough to move the needle, that's okay, but we're going to try to start with that because I believe that if you can do this at a relatively low cost, more people will decide to join in, because that seems like a pretty good deal. $800 from my donor advised fund puts a young woman in university for a year. So we launched in 6 countries initially. We're now in 9. So west to east, we're in Tanzania, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Indonesia, India, Philippines, Cambodia, Vietnam. Here are some of our scholars in India. We only launched 3.5 years ago. But as Megan mentioned, we now have over 4,320 young women in the Yugo program. To picture that, that's like lining up 40 Airbus A320s and filling every single seat. We've gotten off to a very fast start. And one of the reasons for that is that we have, and this, I promise, is like my only PowerPoint slide with words, but we sat down as a leadership team and we said, how can we architect this so that nobody in the world would ever want to say no to us, to get involved in making Yugo a global movement? So first of all, what if we all work for free? Our COO is ex-HSBC. She was a chief COO and a chief of staff at various HSBC regional offices in London, Sydney, and Hong Kong. Our CFO runs a hedge fund in Boston. He's on our board. He donates his money. He donates his time. Amy is our chief marketing officer. She's ex-Four Seasons. We choose to work for free. We then, second point, get our global board to cover all admin and all fundraising. And so I'm very lucky that we are fortunate in life. Our investments have done well. We can work for free. The board can cover every dollar of admin, every dollar of fundraising, giving us what we call a zero leakage model. The idea being that we can tell our investors 100%, 0.00, every single dollar given goes directly to the scholarship program, and the scholarships average out at $800 per scholar per year. We were thrilled to have our model endorsed by Dr. Richard Thaler, who teaches at the University of Chicago and also at Berkeley. And Dr. Thaler himself and his wife, France, have committed to fund 25 Hugo Scholars. They give $20,000 a year, and they've made a 5-year commitment. We asked Dr. Thaler, can you endorse us? And this is a video he did. You can find it on our YouTube channel. It's 7.5 minutes, so it's way too long to show right here. So I've saved us all 7 minutes and 4 seconds by basically getting a little excerpt. But we were really excited about Dr. Thaler saying, and if you don't have great eyesight, I can read this. He said, to an economist like me, the waste of human talent is inexcusable. My wife and I have committed to supporting 25 scholars for all 4 years. Just imagine what can happen when a young woman from a poor family in a low-income country can become a nurse, a teacher, or he said with a self-deprecating drop in his voice, or even an economist. We believe that Hugo produces, and now this is a very highly technical term, more good stuff per dollar than any organization. It is clearly a high ROI model of philanthropy. So we were psyched to have a Nobel Prize-winning economist endorse us. What we're more psyched about is the number of parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles who are endorsing us by helping their daughters to overcome their fear, to go off to university. We were overwhelmed in our first year. Even though we were a startup, we had budget for 500 scholarships in our first year. And I should mention that every one of our scholarships we give is a long-term scholarship. It's not a one-off, it's not a 1 year, it's not let's pray our portfolio does well, let's pray we don't change direction like that dog in Up that's like, squirrel! Because a lot of organizations do that, they keep changing their priorities. So we made a promise to every young woman, either we match you against a 4-year commitment from a donor, or if we get a one-off gift from a donor, we sequester $3 of that $4 away for a future year and spend 1 out of $4 in the year of the gift. The parents love this because they realize it's up to their daughter. We tell the young women you have to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to advance to the next grade. If you do that, the scholarship renews automatically. Our first year, we had money, we had funding, we thought, for 500 scholarships. We were overwhelmed, even though we were a startup, by demand. So we traveled more, we begged more, we did our best, and we put 959 young women into the program in 2022. Our second year, we increased that to 2,500. In our third year, we increased that to 4,320. Now, it's cool to scale like this, but it's only good to scale if you're getting results. So we monitor the young women very closely through our local partners, and what's awesome about this is that in our first year, 98.1%, 49 out of 50 students advanced to the next grade. The next year, higher, 98.3%. To put this in perspective, in the United States, 30% of students drop out after their first year of university. We have a dropout rate right now that is less than 2%. Now, past performance is no guarantor of future performance, so we monitor this very closely. We make sure we keep tabs on all the young women. But this year, we're excited because the academic year starts as early as this month, July, in India, and it goes through about November in Nepal. But we will welcome an additional 2,700 young women into the program this year, raising our total to 7,001. We say 7,001 because we want to remind ourselves that every scholarship matters. You can talk about large numbers. Large numbers are great when you're talking about scale and impact, but every scholarship matters. Our 5-year goal, as Megan mentioned, is 10,001. We'll be launching a campaign called Be the One, asking our investors, prospective and current, to help us continue to think big. I'm going to close with 2 things. One is going to seem cheeky, but I like being cheeky. Because if you're not a little bit cheeky or controversial, people don't remember what you say. And I'm going to close with a video that's going to produce a few tears in the audience. The cheeky statement is very simple. Hugo's goal is to change the way we think about university scholarships. We oftentimes think it's the role of the government. We often think it's the role of billionaires. I don't have $1 billion. What I have is a lot of ambition and a lot of energy. But if you think about the world today, if you want to go talk to a development office at a major university, you better have a really big number in mind, or else you are irrelevant to them. If you are Steven Schwartzman, and you can put $550 million into the Schwartzman Scholars Program at Tsinghua University, That's great. They would love that. And God bless Stephen Schwartzman for doing it, because he's leading by example. But the Schwartzman Scholars, that's 150 scholars per year. It's a reasonably large number, but it's 150. The Gates, my old boss, Bill, the Gates Scholars Program at Cambridge, God bless him, 200 scholars per year. But if we wait for the billionaires to make every change needed, especially in overlooked parts of the world, like rural Bangladesh and rural Pakistan and places like that, we're going to be waiting a long time. So my challenge to our team and our investors and our regional boards is very simple. It's once upon a time we out-Starbucked Starbucks. And Howard Schultz never wrote me a check, by the way, yet. But if you take these 4 billionaires and you add up the number of scholars, and they name the programs after themselves, we name the program YouGo so that it can be a vessel that we can all feel a part of, and we can make that promise to young women that you will go to university. But if you look at these 4 billionaires, in the next year, they will fund 743 new university scholarships. YouGo will fund 2,680. So we're about 3.5x. As one simple startup organization that's 3.5 years old, we're setting the tone, and we're saying all due respect to the billionaires. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. They should do it, and they should do more of it. But for the rest of us, what can we do? Well, the rest of us, and I'm not going to make this sound like a pitch, but it's just my vision, is that the rest of us can all come together and say we could make this the largest scholarship program in the world for young women. Literally on $800 a year, why can this not be the largest scholarship program in the world? We've honestly believed that it can be, because we see the early results, we see the enthusiasm, we see our investors, our regional board members, our scholars. This is our offsite in Da Nang, Vietnam that happened in April. We see the energy of these young women, and they have what it takes. They are jumping for joy at the opportunity to be a teacher, a veterinarian, an economist, an accountant, a doctor, a lawyer, an entrepreneur. That's the future they dream of. So I'm going to close before we'll leave time for Q&A. And James, I hope I'm ahead of the clock, not behind the clock. Thank you for the thumbs up. I'm going to close with just a video that I love. And Amy, my wife, and our CMO, along with our volunteer, Kirsten Sansom, worked with our local teams to put this video together. It's pretty self-explanatory, but let me just do a very quick explanation of it. We call it Tears of Joy. The idea being that rather than sending the young women an email or a text message, we would say to them, can you sign on to a Zoom call? Can you sign on to a WhatsApp video call? The local team has some news to share with you. Congratulations. Welcome to the YouGo family.
Welcome to the YouGo family.
We are happy to share this with you that you are selected as a YouGo scholar. Congratulations.
We have some news to share with you. And I can promise you that it is not bad news. I can promise you that it is very, very, very good news.
Congratulations, you have been selected for the YouGo scholarship. Welcome to YouGo family.
Congratulations and welcome to the global YouGo family.
Congratulations, you have been selected to be a YouGo scholar.
Em sẽ không phải đi tìm bất kỳ nguồn tài trợ nào khác nữa vì em đã chính thức trở thành F14 của Vietsit. Chúc mừng em.
I'm very excited to welcome you to the YouGo family.
You've achieved something incredible. We are sure that your family and friends are as proud of you as we are. So stay focused and keep reaching for the stars.
So we have some news to share with you. Congratulations. You are now being selected for the YouGo Women's Scholarship Program, and it is a long-term scholarship. Congratulations.
Yeah. Big clap for our new scholar.
Clap for yourself.
Clap for yourself.
You earned it. You deserve it. Yes.
I'm crying. I'm crying.
I'm very, very thankful po sa Yana Foundation and sa Yugo Scholarship. This opportunity po is really a big help to me and my family. I would really strive harder para maging deserving po ng scholarship na to. And yun na po. Thank you very much. Thank you.
मैं अपनी खुशी एक्सप्लेन नहीं कर पा रही हूँ क्योंकि मतलब अब सब कुछ सही हो रहा है अब मतलब मुझे ये लग रहा था कि अगर मुझे युगो मिल जाती तो पापा को उधार नहीं लेना पड़ता लेकिन कोई बात नहीं इतनी कैपेबल हो जाती हूँ कि मैं अपनी पढ़ाई कंप्लीट करके जो मुझे अचीव करना है वो मैं अचीव करती हूँ तो मेक श्योर मैं भी कुछ ऐसा करूँगी कि जिससे और भी लोग पढ़ सके मेरी तरह जो करना चाहते हैं और भी चीज़ें वो भी पढ़ सके अपने सपने पूरे कर सके
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah. Wow. Ang hirap. Hirap magpaaral, ma'am, na ano. Single father, ma'am. Malaking kaginawa ang kagaan, ma'am. Kasi mga ibang financial, medyo na papagaan.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Cảm ơn chị ạ.
Oh, terima kasih po.
Thank you.
अच्छा लग रहा मैम अब ये लग रहा है कि पापा के अलावा कोई और भी तो है हम लोग को सपोर्ट करने के लिए
So, welcome to Yes.
Thank you so much po. Thank you so much, Ayala Foundation and Yugo.
We look forward to being with you as you embark on this journey toward achieving your goals.
Yes.
I really need of this scholarship. Thank you so much.
Terima kasih banyak Yugo.
Facing fears and climbing higher, dreams fulfilled with hearts on fire, gratitude that knows no bounds. Yugo lifts us off the ground. Thankful for the doors they open, words of thanks so softly spoken. Hope and dreams now close at hand. Yugo lifts us off the ground.
Thank you. Thank you. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have told you our story tonight. This is not a fundraising pitch, but I'll simply say we cannot do this alone. We built one global movement in Room to Read, and we're looking to build another global movement. So whether it's here in Colorado or you're visiting from out of town, Amy and I will stick around, exchange business cards. Would love to get more people involved in this, but more importantly, we'd love to make sure that I honor my commitment to James, that I'd stop talking by 7 p.m. and leave time for Q&A.
Hi.
Hi.
I have actually been to Nepal, and I've been to a couple of the schools there when I was trekking with one of my girlfriends, and it was in the early 2000s, so it was definitely before many of those libraries had been added. My question, I have two. One is for the girls in Yugo, are they predominantly going to schools local? So like if it's a Pakistani girl,
100% are local.
100%.
We're not trying to move them across the border, which would be logistically challenging and economically inefficient. They're going to, and one of our gating factors for our new country is, are there enough quality universities that if we recruit the scholars, they will have spots? We work with the governments very closely to say, what are you trying to do at a national level? Vietnam needs more nurses. The Philippines needs more teachers. So we work with them very closely to make sure that we have a system in place that lets the young women find a place, get a spot in university, and hopefully be studying in a subject that will get her to have a promising career.
And then I guess my follow-up question is, it sounds like there's criteria. So coming into their secondary education, they would have had to have good grades or apply for the scholarship, and that
Exactly.
Gotcha. Thank you.
We're just really briefly, we're looking for young women who've finished in the top quarter to 1/3 of their graduating class, because if they haven't been able to do that, they probably will not succeed in university. We're looking for family support. We know the families are going to be supportive. We look for whether or not they volunteered in their community. We like to know that even if they are from a poor family, have they done something, even if it's minor? Have they brought food to an aging relative? Do they have a good heart? And then do they have a path forward? With no offense to someone who wants to study poetry, if they want to study poetry, that's great, but that's not going to lead to a career. And one thing I didn't talk about here, but that I think we all know it, but that when a young woman in the developing world earns a marginal dollar, she spends 90% of it on her family, on food, clothing, shelter, education, medicine. Men tend to spend 35%. So if you can get a young woman into a career, she takes care of herself, her family, and her community. So those are excellent questions. Thank you.
Here's one from our online audience. There we go. In Cambodia, most universities are in Phnom Penh, and many lack dormitories for women. Since many female students relocate from rural areas to study in the city, does the Yugo Scholarship provide support for safe housing for its outstanding women scholars?
I could give a long answer, but I'll give a short answer. Yes. That is part of what the $800 goes towards. Third row, James, and then we have someone wearing black in the 7th row. Oh, sorry, third row. You're next.
Hi, you mentioned a couple times your involvement with government agencies. How difficult, or how are you getting in contact with some of the agencies, the government officials over there? And then when you do, I know there's a lot of corruption in some of these companies, so how do you, or countries, so how do you manage that?
Yeah, so our work in country is all done through local partners. So we work with local partners who have been operating in those countries for 10, 15, 20 years. So our partner in Pakistan, Developments in Literacy, they were founded before Room to Read was founded. They were founded in 1998. So they know the governments very, very well. In terms of how do you guard against corruption, it's very simple. We don't give money to governments. We do everything through our partners, and that money flows from the partner to the university for tuition, or to the young women through a quarterly stipend to help them pay for food, transportation, clothing, books, etc.
Some of the students are in remote areas. Do you offer an online program for any of the students to participate in the for the 4 years?
Yes and no. No, in the sense that we only want to work in a way that we know the young woman can go to a university where she has a cohort, she has professors, she has other students who surround her, and that she can learn in the classroom. We do some supplemental training over Zoom. For example, a number of executives in Silicon Valley have started a program called the Yugo AI. They volunteer their time to teach AI classes to our young students over Zoom, with the goal being AI is not your way to cheat on homework. AI is, to me, like AI is, if you studied finance in 1982, you had to learn how to use an HP 12C calculator. If you studied it in 95, you need to learn how to use Microsoft Excel. So these volunteers are teaching. This year, we'll train over 2,000 of our 4,300 scholars on AI via Zoom sessions. We also have a female empowerment speaker series called Unstoppable Together. This is supplemental, but we have women business leaders from across Asia talk to the young women over these group sessions on Zoom that will have 150, 200, 250 young women in the session. So there's some supplemental things we do online, but every single one of our scholars goes to an actual physical university.
From our online audience, is UGO currently or open to partnering with the specialty curriculum enrichment programs to share with its scholars and/or universities they attend?
Too vague for me to answer, but they can email info@ugouniversity.org. And the more specific they can be, the more likely we can answer the question.
How many applicants do you have relative to the number of scholarships you provide?
What is your name?
Tom Mallman, M-A-L-L-M-A-N, and I'm involved in another scholarship program.
And all I'm going to say, I'm so glad you asked that question. Because I forgot, the thing is we could do this work, and if we had too much capital but not enough applicants, that would be one problem. We have the exact opposite problem. In the Philippines this year, we've had over 20,000 qualified applicants for 350 spots. So our acceptance rate in the Philippines is lower than Harvard, lower than Stanford. And we don't believe that's a good thing. We don't believe that any university should pride itself on what is technically a high rejection rate. They can call it a low acceptance rate, but it's a high rejection rate. So that's one thing that keeps us motivated all the time. And to someone's question about working with governments, our partner in the Philippines is the Ayala Foundation. The Ayala family is one of the most successful families in the Philippines. Mariana Ayala is a founding member of our global board. So when we need something from the university presidents or the governments, we can use those connections to be able to get the hearing we need. So one of the things we're doing right now, for example, is working with the ministries of health, talking to them in Nepal, for example, to say, how can we work with you more closely to get the program from 50 nurses today to 1,000 nurses in the next 5 years, because Nepal needs nurses, and a lot of Nepalese, when they get educated, they can also go overseas and make a nice income to remit to their families.
John, can you speak a little bit about the role that a business background played in framing the vision and moving the execution? Philanthropy at your scale is phenomenal and inspiring, and I'm wondering what the business background was.
Yeah, what I would say is that all of our leadership team have all worked in I call us corporate refugees. We've all worked in the business world. So HSBC, KKR, in Amy's case, Four Seasons, in my case, Microsoft. But the partners themselves are not so much business people. The partners work with their social entrepreneurs in their country. So it's a little bit of melding of each. I mentioned earlier my saying at Room to Read was the heart of Mother Teresa, the scalability of Starbucks. We don't want to just be hardcore capitalists in running the programs. We do want to think like capitalists in terms of how we structure these things, our KPIs, our dashboards, our expense. Our overhead is less than 5% of total donations. We run a very, very, very tight ship. And that's partly because our CFO, Tim Kaflish, is ex-KKR, now runs a hedge fund in Boston, so he knows how to manage an income statement and how to press us to keep our expenses low.
There was a follow-up via text, and then we'll come over there. Are there other organizations or founders or figures that have served as an inspiration to you in serving a global community?
I think my biggest hero, who's unfortunately died tragically early, is Paul Farmer, the founder of co-founder of Partners in Health. If you want a good book, besides my book, which is available for sale here tonight, but Tracy Kidder wrote a book called Mountains Beyond Mountains, which is all about this young guy named Paul Farmer who's at Harvard Medical School, and he's going to Haiti, and he's realizing that kids are dying from diarrhea. And he's like, why can this country be so close to America? He co-founded Partners in Health, and it's just a beautiful story. And his life made my life look easy, because I'm just flying around the world trying to raise money, and he's like hiking to these rural villages in Haiti, and it's a bazillion degrees, and he wants to be proximate to the patient. So he is definitely one of my heroes.
So you clearly know how to raise money, given your experience with Room to Read and all you've accomplished. What's your fundraising model for UGO?
UGO's fundraising model is we ask people to make four-year commitments, if possible, because that then matches the commitment we made to the young women. It's not necessary, but it's politely and humbly requested. 70% of our founding funders have made four-year commitments. I mentioned earlier when we get a one-off commitment, so if we're at an event in Hong Kong and Amy's auctioning off the Four Seasons Tanzania prize and it goes for $20,000, we will lock 3/4 of that money away for future years. So we have a board-designated reserve, what Al Gore used to call the lockbox. We have that. And then our model really is just, it's super scalable. Would you like to help fund one young woman, or would you like to help 10 or 20 or 50 or 100? Our largest funder is Andrew Balls and his wife Erica. He's the chief investment officer of PIMCO. They're sponsoring 600 scholars, and they're making a commitment to do that for 4 years. Our sweet spot tends to be people funding 5 or 10 or 20. We have a number of people who are funding 100. And then we work with businesses. So JP Morgan Private Bank is funding 50 scholars for 4 years. The Mishcon de Rea Law Firm in London is funding 100 young scholars. We have an entrepreneur in San Diego named Suzanne Reich. If you've ever looked at the Alpenrock clothing brand, they are committing. We haven't gone public yet. So if you're watching this online, please don't record this session. But they're committed to funding 1,000 scholars. So they're making an $800,000 commitment. But we like Papa Bear's great, Mama Bear's great, Teenage Bear's great, Baby Bear's great. We're open to anything and everything. But we just keep going back to the 800 number. That sounds incredibly redundant, but it's just to remind people that just literally that's the difference between a young woman going to school to university and not going to university.
What happens if the 800 doesn't, does the 800 always cover all the expenses, and what happens if it doesn't in certain situations?
We're so far 100% compliant. It's a blended average. So we have young women in Vietnam going to medical school. That's more like $1,100 a year. The scholarships in Cambodia quite often come in a bit less. So it's across 4,320 young women. The blended is actually about $740 per student per year. Then 60 is available to our partners to make sure that they have adequate staffing to keep their fingers on the pulse of what's going on. Because while we will all work for free, the young women in the Philippines or Cambodia can't afford to do that. So we make sure we give our partners the opportunity to be able to hire, again, local headcount. You can hire an awesome young person in the Philippines for $6,000 a year, and they're grateful for the opportunity because it's more money than they would make doing what they're doing, but it also gives them a chance to help their country.
John, we have a wonderfully philanthropic community here in Vail. As a philanthropist yourself, I wonder, how did you learn the craft? How do you gauge your impact, aside from your obvious sweat equity in the mission?
Say again, can you ask me
How do
again?
you think about your personal philanthropy?
Oh, my personal philanthropy. So, well, I make money from investing, but that can be hit or miss. But my personal philanthropy is every December, Amy and I fill up our donor advised fund with what we can afford to fill it up. And we will write a little bit of a check to Hugo, but most of our donor advised fund, we just keep it so when a friend says, I'm doing this marathon, or I'm doing this thing, or I'm working with a girls' school in Uganda, we can drop relatively small amounts of money to them. And then our goal every year is by the halfway point of the year, the donor advised fund should be half empty. And by December 31st, it should be empty. And then you refill it with whatever your winnings were for that year. So that's my personal philanthropy. We fund probably 20 to 25 different causes a year personally, and then we give our sweat equity and work for free for Hugo.
This is a question going back to Room to Read.
Yeah.
Can you remind us how many books you've published in languages, different languages, and do you have 5 favorites, and what are they?
5 favorites? You'd have to go to roomtoread.org to get the latest numbers, but it's over 40 million books in, I think, 61 languages or something like that. We started an Arabic language publishing program after the Syrian war started. It's incredible how many different languages the books have been published in. It's one of the greatest stories in the history of publishing. It just hasn't been adequately told at this point. My favorite, I'll give you my favorite. My favorite is a book called The Dog and the Coconuts. And it's a book written in Lao, or Laos as some people call it. And it just basically teaches kids math. So there's a dog, he's a scrappy entrepreneur, he's got his coconut cart. And it's like there's 20 coconuts on the cart, and then he sells 2 of them. How many does he have left? 8. Say it with me, 18. And then he goes to, and then someone else comes, and then one rolls off the coconut cart. How many does he have? 17. There's a book in Vietnam called Father's Jar of Money, which teaches kids about saving. There's a book in South Africa called Jingle, Jingle in My Pocket. And it's about a young woman who goes to see her grandmother, and if she gets good grades, her grandmother gives her a little bit of money. And that's what she calls the jingle, jingle in her pocket. And she usually goes and buys dolls or candy or paints or things like that. I'm glad you asked the question. There's just so many fun titles. I'll give you one more. A book in Sri Lanka titled Baby Fish Goes to School. It was written by, we actually did a young writers competition. We actually challenged teenagers to come up with story ideas. And as we all know who have teenagers, they can be incredibly creative. This young woman wrote a story about a fish who was in a fishbowl with her mom. And every day she would watch the rabbit and the dog and the cat and the fox go to school. Sorry, she's swimming in her pond. Sorry, that's very important in the story. And every day she sees these animals and she says, "Where are you going?" And they're like, "We're going to school." And she goes, "That's cool. What happens at school?" Like, we sing songs, we dance, we play games. And the fish goes, "I want to go to school." And the mother goes, "You can't. The school's on land. And you're a fish." Baby fish is like, "That totally sucks." Rough translation from the Sinhalese. And then the animals, because they're GSD, the animals come up with an idea, and they go out and they buy a fish bowl, and they scoop up baby fish, and et voila, baby fish goes to school. And that was one of my favorites. We tried doing fundraising events where we actually had fish bowls, and we asked people to put money in the fish bowl, but didn't carry over.
I'm sure you have thousands of stories of what has happened with some of your successes, and be interested in maybe one or two, but also from the student's perspective. And then also, there's probably been difficulties or failures. How did that person's experience unfold, and what do you do about that?
Yeah, I think you're always going to fail at things. If you're not failing, you're not taking risks. And I could make a baseball analogy. If you hit 340, you get paid $26 million. But I believe in taking risks. The local language, saying in 2003, I was asked by a friend, "Isn't it risky saying you're going to reach 10 million children by 2020? What if you don't reach that goal?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what people are going to say. What a loser. He only helped 4 million children. That guy's a loser." I was like, just throw it out there. We're going to take a risk. This is not public yet, but I'll share it with you as my new friends in Vail. But we've been approached by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees to start funding scholarships for Afghan refugee women in Pakistan. You may or may not know that the Pakistan government refused to allow Afghan refugees to go to university for fear that it would set off a political backlash that they were stealing spots. Our partner, Development and Literacy, I asked them in year one, keep your eye open for what's happening. Would like to help Afghan refugees because Afghanistan went through a beautiful period after the fall of the Taliban where young women were going to primary, going to secondary, going to university, and then boom, it all ended when the Taliban came back to power. 800,000 Afghans now live on the Pakistan side of the border. The UNHCR has now convinced the Pakistani government to open up university slots for Afghan refugees, men and women. They asked us to potentially fund the young women. We looked at it, we did some interviews, we did our due diligence, we said, this will probably not yield a 98.3% advancement rate because these young women have particular challenges, but you know what? We're gonna do it anyway. We're gonna take the risk because we have to take that risk. And if we fail, how do I deal with it? I basically, when we fail, I say, it's on me. I'm the CEO. Jim Collins, one of my favorite authors, used to talk about successful business executives and said the most successful executives had a test called the mirror and the window. And the mirror and the window, you may know this parable, it's very simple. If something goes wrong, the leader has to look in the mirror and say, what did I do wrong? If something goes right, the leader has to look out the window and say, where can I find 4 or 5 people from my team who I can praise for having done a job really, really well? So we will fail at stuff. We have failed at stuff. And I'm like, you just got to accept it, and you got to learn your lessons from it and be resilient. Orion, one of his favorite books is called Sumo Kitty. And Sumo Kitty's model is you can knock me down 7 times, I'll get back up 8 times.
Over here. I'm going to appeal to your Microsoft background and ask a process question.
You want me to fix windows for you, or?
Yes, yes. 20,000 applicants for 350 slots. What's the process for choosing the most deserving young women? Who's actually making the selection? And is there any sort of process in place to make certain that those selections were the right ones?
Yeah, so the first thing we've done on that issue in the Philippines is we put together an annual fundraising event for the Philippine business community. JP Morgan Private Bank and the law firm Mishcon de Rea co-sponsor the dinner. I fly to Manila every year. I've done it 4 years in a row now. And I challenge the Philippine business community to say, if you're proud of your country, I'll make a challenge to you. Every single dollar you commit, every peso, every dollar, will match you 1 for 1 with capital that comes from outside the Philippines. To date, over half of our capital in the Philippines has come from the local business community. And this year, by September, we'll have our 1,000th Philippine scholar, maybe our 1,001 first Philippine scholar. The vetting process is done by all local, the Ayala family, who runs the Ayala group of companies. One of the skilled volunteering programs for their Ayala Land, Ayala Energy, Ayala Hospitality is those executives can volunteer to help interview the young women. But quite honestly, of all the ones, we're rejecting so many who deserve to go. And there's no way in the world you could say, we absolutely picked the best and the most deserving 330. Nope, we picked 330 who are awesome and who are deserving, but we're leaving thousands behind. In the back row in the white. Oh. Hi, okay, great.
What if there's pushback in certain communities, they don't want their daughters going to school, or there's violence about it?
We have the opposite of pushback. If there's an opposite of pushback, we have tailwinds. I mean, literally in all these countries, families are lining up to get their young daughters into our program. Now, are there families out there who don't want their daughters to go to university? There are, I'm sure. But I don't have to go focus on that right now because we've already got a line out the door that could run from here to downtown Lion's Head.
Hi.
Hi.
What you've done is really amazing. And I was wondering, do you have a favorite story where you've met with a graduate and family and had dinner and talked about, life and what they went through in school and...
Yeah, I mentioned in passing the story of Hawe, who's a Cambodian student, and we've had several dinners with her, including when Amy's parents retired as public school teachers. Our graduation gift to them was going to Cambodia and having dinner with 8 young women who'd finished the Room to Read program and gone on to university. And I'll never forget Hawe's story because she grew up in a poor village, and she said that when she decided she was going to go to high school, everyone in the village gossiped about her, told her, your head's too big, you'll never succeed, you come from a poor family, your family is poor as dirt. She ended up going to university with the help of one of our board members. She, as I mentioned earlier, she put all of her 8 younger siblings through secondary school and 3 or 4 of them through university. At one point in time when we met her, Hawe said, my brother's in Thailand studying at university. He speaks the Thai language. My sister's in Korea at a university. She speaks fluent Korean. My other brother is in Japan studying university, studying the Japanese language. She said, Hawe Dunn's family now is the United Nations. We have, and everybody in the village now, they want their daughter to be like Hawe. She met a German man during her studies. She's now living in Cologne in Germany. She's had her first child, and she's now studying for a master's in environmental engineering. So that was, just one of these stories. I'll tell you just one other quick story from our Singapore event this year. We had a young woman named, was it Dua? Dua. And she now attends a school called IBA, which is one of the most prestigious universities in Pakistan. She wanted to study computer science, but when she told her parents that she wanted to go to IBA, her father said to her, daughter, do not dream dreams that are too big for your reality. Those universities are not built for people like us. She told that story to a ballroom in Singapore with 200 people in it. And every one of those people, especially if you're a parent, you think, what would it feel like if you were a parent who had to talk your children down out of ambitious dreams? Thankfully, she applied to our partner for a scholarship. She got into IBA, but she couldn't study computer science because she got rejected. She got put in the business program. She got good grades after a year. She reapplied, and she's now in the computer science program. Daughter, do not dare to dream dreams that are too big. These young women, you can't tell them not to dream big. They know this is their one big chance, their one big opportunity.
Thank you for what you do. I find it very interesting, and I applaud your team for working for free. And so I've been involved in an organization for 20 years. It's Helping Our World One-on-One. It's out of Uganda. And we have challenges just getting people to work for free, keeping the momentum up, the motivation up. And so can you expand on how your team keeps the motivation up, and also just apply it to more of a middle-class church who doesn't have the donors that you have?
Yeah. What was the first part of the question again? Sorry, my little squirrel brain can't answer two questions at once.
How do you keep the team
keep the team motivated. That one's pretty simple. When we interview potential partners in each country, so for example, in Tanzania, we were approached by a group called SEGA School. SEGA stands for Secondary Education for Girls Advancement. They've been running a program for 10 years to help young women who traditionally were getting married or pregnant at age 13 or 14 to go to university and to have a vision. We interviewed them. We have 3 of our donors are board members of that NGO in Tanzania. We interviewed Pauline, who's a Tanzanian woman who runs the program, and it was just an energy smash up. It was a complete and total cultural DNA fit. If we are talking to a potential partner and they seem like they're unmotivated or low energy, that's probably a problem I can't solve for them. So we only work with partners who are just waking up in the morning and bringing as much energy to their work as Amy and I are bringing energy to our work. Thankfully, there's a backlog of partners now who want to work with us who are all highly, highly engaged and skilled at what they do. But I'm very much a Buddhist at heart. I believe in only focusing on the things I can control. And if there's a group out there that's just not that motivated or it's not doing great work, I probably can't go solve their problems for them.
Kind of hand in hand from our online audience, the NGO's programming and scaling efforts are commendable for many reasons. What is your strategy for ensuring long-term sustainability for both the programs and the organizations behind them?
I think you basically, as a leader, you have to put together hundreds, if not thousands of people who believe in the cause. And so I can sleep late and stuff's getting done. I can go on holiday and I don't take that much holiday and things are getting done. Why? My whole motto has always been recruit, delegate, repeat. Recruit, delegate, repeat. So we have a UK board, we're building a Swiss board, we have a Wild West board, which we're looking for people to be on our Wild West board. It connects Seattle with Portland, with the Bay Area, with San Diego, with Denver, with Santa Fe. We have a Hong Kong regional board, a Singapore regional board, a Philippines board, an Australia board. My motto is just more leaders in more places equals more impact. So the sustainability thing is pretty much figured out by multi-year commitments, board designated reserves, so that every one of those 7,001 Hugo scholars coming into the program by the end of this year are fully funded for all 4 years, and you just build out a phenomenal team of people around the world who have your back and are going to work together without ego, without politics, with a focus on one thing and one thing only, getting those young women off the waiting list and into university. And also, I've done it once before. I left Room to Read 3.5 years ago. They've not missed a beat. Why? Because we focused on making sure that the next generation of leadership was talented, motivated, and able to run the show. So I could leave Hugo in 20 years, at age whatever, 20 plus my current age is.
John, as a closing thought, you appear to be someone who is laser focused on doing good and finding good.
Yeah.
Give us something to hang our hat on so that our community, your ripple in our community continues to be positive.
Yeah, I'll tell you just one thing in closing is that I worked for years with an executive coach who was pro bono, because my favorite Latin phrase is pro bono. I'll get him Jeff Balin. Jeff's family is Jewish. He lived in Tibet and worked with refugee families in Tibet for a number of years. He studied Tibetan Buddhism. And I said to him one day, Jeff, you always just ask me questions. You never give advice because you're a good coach. How does that make you feel, John? I'm like, what's your view, Jeff? You've studied, you've studied the Torah, you've studied Buddhism, you've been in synagogue for your entire life. You're a very thoughtful guy. What's the secret to life? And he said, there's no secret. He said, it's simple. You figure out what you want to say on your deathbed, and you work backwards from there. And if what you do today is in alignment, you just keep on keeping on. But if what you are doing today is not in alignment, you better start getting in alignment because life's short. There's a book that's very popular right now called Die With Nothing. And the idea being that once you've looked out for your kids and grandkids, if there's surplus you have, I'm not saying give it to all to charity. I'm saying if you have something on your bucket list of going to Machu Picchu or going to Namibia, like go do it, because we're going to get to a point. My mother's 94 and she can't travel anymore. And it kills me because we had so many great trips together to Zambia, we went to New Zealand, to Nepal. She was in Nepal for her 84th birthday. Like, it was so cool, but now that moment is gone forever. So whatever it is, whether it be leaving a legacy or traveling or doing cool stuff, I just go back to what Jeff said. And it doesn't have to be, I shouldn't say your deathbed speech. It just be when you're in your rocking chair on your porch and your days are numbered. What do you want to say at that point? What is your legacy? And if you know what your legacy is, phenomenal. Just keep investing in your legacy. If you don't know what your legacy is, you should really figure it out. People who have a sense of purpose live longer lives. They have lower instances of alcohol and drug abuse. They have higher instances of health and longevity. Why? Because people wake up in the morning and they feel like they have a purpose. When people wake up in the morning and don't feel like they have a purpose, life is just very, very different. So I feel fortunate, Amy and I feel fortunate because we wake up every day. We are crystal clear that it is family, it's friends, it's Yugo, it's athletics, and it's continuing to always be book nerds.
Hear, hear, John Wood.
Thanks, brother. Thank you.